Hi, did you ever wonder what we're supposed to know or ask before we get married? Some of us just agree to marriage based off of any number of things. But what if there is a way that we could get to know our partner more in depth, have a better understanding of who they are and where they came from before we made that decision so that we could know a bit more of what we're signing up for? Because we know what we take with us into a relationship is where we've been and what our past experiences are. That doesn't mean it's a life sentence because we can always learn new things, we can always change it, we can always grow, but we can't really do that until we're first aware of it. So today, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you 4 questions that you can ask yourself and also your partner to get to know them better. If you're already married, it would be the same process. You could get to know your partner better even if you've already said I do, so that you could have a deeper, more understanding, closer relationship with them. Hi, my name is Olivia, and I am passionate about helping you understand what relational trauma is so that you can heal, overcome, and ultimately move on with your life. So today, everything is coming from my book. It's called Do I? You can find it on Amazon. I will leave a link to it in the description. And today is on page 34. So part of these questions are going to help us understand what we saw in terms of a relationship when we were growing up. So when we're seeing stuff with our little kid brain, we're making sense of it, and if we don't look back and challenge it, we keep operating off the sense that we made of that when we were little. So what we want to do is take a look at what we might have learned, also try to understand what our partner might have learned, so that we can both decide, is this what we want for us moving forward? So there may be some really obvious things where you're like, no, I don't want any part of that. I never want that to be my life. But again, if we don't first look at it, there's a great chance we are going to have that because we haven't had a chance to challenge it and to replace it with something that we do want. Okay, so here is a question. And again, partners can skip any questions that they want, right? Because remember, not everyone is proud of where they came from. So if there's ever a question that you're like, that's like way too private, I am not ready to talk about that, you always have a right to privacy and you always have a right to decline to answer a question. Always. It doesn't really matter who's asking. But if we are about to get married and we're declining more questions than we're answering, then that might be a good indicator we may want to look at counseling, because we're supposed to have the most trust with our partner. We're supposed to be the most vulnerable with our partners more than anyone. So if we're still not able to be vulnerable, then chances are we have some more healing that we need to do, especially maybe I would say before we say I do and tie the knot. But either way, it's good for us to just get through that healing. So be mindful. Yes, we all have a right to decline any question. I would say there are deal breaker questions, which we will talk about later on. I think specifically with finances, because you're legally tied to someone financially when you say I do. So if someone's refusing to answer financial questions, that would be I'm not getting married until I have these answers for me. So everyone has to decide what those deal breakers are. But I would say in most aspects, we all have a right to privacy. And even with finances, you do, but also be prepared that someone may not say I do to you if you're not going to share your finances with them. So today is all about what we saw growing up in the home that we were in, especially in terms of affection. So the first question is on page 34. So again, skip any questions that you don't feel comfortable answering. And also only ask and answer these when it's safe and if it is safe. If you don't feel safe, then that's a whole nother issue that you would want to address before you try to get to these intimate questions. But if you are feeling safe and you feel like you're in a place where you're good to start asking these questions and answering them, then this is a really fun exercise, or it can be. But again, we have to be aware, not everyone is proud of where they came from. So we want to ask these questions delicately and not pass a judgment on someone's parents, because that's still their parents. So they're probably not perfect human beings, because none of us are. So we just want to be cautious and just mostly listen, I would say, other than maybe asking more questions. Okay, so the first one is, did you see affection between your parents? And if so, what did it look like? So affection would be things like holding hands, kissing, hugging, sitting close with each other, putting arms around each other. Any type of affection, hugging. Did you see that between your parents growing up? So that's the first question. And if you didn't, because maybe you never knew one of your parents, maybe one of your parents was not in the home, what about any other partners? Did you see whoever the primary parent was that raised you, did you see them being affectionate with anyone any other type of partner, specifically partner? And if so, what did it look like? Or maybe you never saw that, or maybe you were too little, and then by the time you were older, they got divorced. So whether it was there or not, you can't answer, but did you just see it? Maybe you never saw it because they weren't there, they weren't a couple. So between your parents, any parent that you had access to, and if not between your parents because they're not together, then did you see them be affectionate with any partner at all? And what did it look like? Because this kind of gives us a heads up. Lots of ways, the number one way actually that a child learns is through modeling. So if I'm not watching affection being modeled to me, probably not going to really know how to do it. I'm going to struggle knowing when to do it, how to do it. It could feel really uncomfortable. Whereas if it's normalized in my home, I'm watching people be affectionate all the time in a healthy, loving way, then there's a better chance that I'm going to be more affectionate. So if my partner is really affectionate and I am not, I may unknowingly hurt my partner. And once my partner understands, oh, she grew up with zero affection, she doesn't understand it, then that's something that I can learn and someone can work with me with. But if we don't ever have this conversation, we're not going to know. Okay, so here's the next one. So after you ask and answer that and share with each other to the degree that you're comfortable with, you have to make that decision. Here is another question. Were you shown affection? So were you told, I love you? Were you hugged? Were you held? Did someone put their arm around you? Did you have any parent showing you any type of affection? Because again, if someone's showing me affection, even to me, that makes it a lot easier for me to then be affectionate to someone else. But if I really wasn't held, if I really wasn't told I was loved, if I really wasn't comforted, I'm not going to know how to do that. It's kind of like a computer, right? It has to be put in me for me to pull it out and to operate off of. But if it's never kind of downloaded or uploaded to me, then I don't really have those skills to pull out and use. They're not, the files are empty. So it's just being mindful, like, okay, plus, hopefully that helps you deal with your partner differently if you understand they had no affection, or if you understand they come from a lot of affection. Because if someone's coming from a lot of affection, then it's probably expected that you're going to have affection in the relationship. So that may feel like a lot of pressure. It could feel like demanding. It might feel clinging to you if you're not used to it. But when we understand, oh, this is what they know, doesn't make them anything other than this is what is normal to them. Now we can have a conversation like, that wasn't normal to me. Is there a happy medium? Because I maybe am not quite on your end of the spectrum, but I realize I want more than what I had. Can we find a middle? So hopefully you can see the point of these questions is to spark conversation and to get used to sharing. Because the more we can learn how to share and say hard things and hear hard things, the better we're going to be at our marriage. Because the marriage requires communication and a lot of us just don't have the skills. So these are some guided questions to help you. But again, if it's ever too hard, you can always take a break. You can always decline or pass to answer the question. And the point is to respect each other, respect each other's need for privacy, but also understanding at some point we're going to have to start to share some things. So where can we share it and where are we not ready? Okay, so the next one. Did you ever see your parents fight? Wow, so did you ever see your parents fight? So if you're trying to realize like, okay, did I ever see them fight? Some people will say no, that their entire lives, they never, ever heard or saw their parents fight. It doesn't mean their parents never fought. They just never saw it. And that can be really hard because when we're seeing people argue and disagree, it's showing us, okay, people are going to argue and disagree, but how do they make up? How do they resolve it? So that's the next question. How did your parents resolve conflict? Did they call names? Were things thrown and broken? Were there threats made? Was it like an escalation followed by days of silence? Every time they fought, did it go to to 900 degrees? Or did they resolve conflict through discussion? Did they resolve conflict through sitting at the table and getting out pen and paper and writing a pros and cons list? How did they resolve conflict? So remember, where we came from is usually what we take with us into our relationship. So we want to look, both of us, as honestly as we can at where did we come from? You could be tempted to idealize it or romanticize it and make it more than it was, or you could also just be hung up on a few really difficult moments and maybe you're maximizing those. So try to have a realistic, idea of where it is you came from and be as open and honest as you can with sharing that. Because again, it's going to help your partner understand you better, which is going to help them to be more patient with you. And also it'll give you both a deeper idea of where it is you're starting from and what you might want to work on as a couple, and also things to watch for. So if I realize like, wow, every time I saw my parents disagree, it was a knockdown, drag out screaming match, and then it was silence, I don't want to do that. So I want to be watching for it so that when we have a disagreement, I don't just naturally go to that. I want to really fight that tendency to just scream and fight, and instead to have some other form of a resolution. So if you're in a relationship right now and you're already struggling with conflict, then I encourage you to get more information. You can Google a couples conflict resolution. You can find worksheets. You can watch psychology students role play it. Because remember, your brain's like a computer. You got to put it in there before you can pull it out. But this way you can have more ideas of ways that you can resolve conflict as a couple, and you can start to take those steps to avoid relational trauma. So those were the 4 questions for today. Again, respect each other's right to privacy, respect each other's right to just not want to go there or talk about it. Sometimes some of these questions can bump into some trauma. So we just trust that if you're not ready to talk about it, I can understand that. Will it always be that way? I hope not. But for today, I can certainly see how this would be hard for you. And so if you say you're not ready, I'm going to trust that, and we're going to go on to the next question. So again, all of this comes from Do I. You can find it on Amazon. Take good care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.